Hello, everyone. This is Francis York Morgan. You're listening to Goddamn Gamecube. But please, call me York. All my friends do.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Goddamn Gamecube. Greg and Riley are your hosts today, and oh my god, I'm so excited. We're talking about Deadly Premonition. I have wanted to talk about this game for like 10 years, and I can't wait to have our long-form discussion today. Riley, why don't you start, because I adore this game. Let's go.
Yes, let's finally talk about Deadly Premonition. Absolutely insane that it took us this long, but here we are. So this game has a bit of a reputation insofar as there are some things about it that are a little rough around the edges, shall we say. Mm-hmm. But there is a lot of heart and charm within, I would say. So this is a very, would you call this like a mid to low budget game?
I believe, according to the director, it is a low budget game.
Okay.
So yes.
Okay, so that's good to keep in perspective as we, kind of air our grievances and our compliments. Just keep that in mind. So this was developed by Access Games and published by Ignition Entertainment in North America in 2010. I believe it had been in production for some time. Directed by what would you call this fellow? A sort of mini auteur, perhaps?
He's a quirky guy, I would say.
He has his own distinct vision. Hidetaki Swearhero goes by Swery. This game chronicles Special Agent, FBI Agent Francis York Morgan as he investigates a series of murders by the Raincoat Killer in the fictional town of Greenville, Washington. And if this sounds similar at all to Twin Peaks, that's because it is. It is. It is very inspired by that. It takes a lot of cues from it in terms of tone, characterization, some similar themes. But as we'll get into, it certainly paves its own path as it goes on. I wanted to ask you really quickly if you had heard of the Netflix documentary called The Raincoat Killer.
No, I never have.
So I was curious about, this was apparently a very notable case, and this was in Korea. And I'm not sure how notable it is, where if it maybe made its way, news of it made its way to Japan, but it was essentially South Korea's first serial killer. And it was something that the investigation was crazy because they were totally unprepared. They had never really experienced the modern, like, American serial killer before. I was curious if this was maybe, I was pondering it. It's a really good, I think a lot of Netflix documentaries are kind of like exploitative or whatever. I thought this was very tasteful.
When did that come out?
This year.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I think that the actual incident was like 2003.
Okay.
But definitely recommend it. Back on topic, just while we're talking about like setting, premise, that kind of thing, what I didn't realize at first is also that, like Twin Peaks, Greenville is a dying like lumber town.
Yep.
And it's like, so there's a good amount of characters in it, but not too many. And I thought that was great because it's like, it explains why it's kind of sparsely populated. Like, it's not quite as booming as it used to be. So we've got the stage set here. I would like to open up the floor and ask what your first experience and impression was of this game.
Okay, so I actually first discovered this game when I worked at GameStop. We did an interview about that. This is way back, right? Like 2010. I worked there from 2010 to like 2014. When some of my, I think it was in one of my first months there, I stocked this game on the shelf. And at that time, I was sort of getting into my, I guess what I call like my encyclopedic gaming phase, where I wanted to try everything.
Yeah.
And so I remember stocking Deadly Premonition, and it just, no one bought it. And, what is this? I've never heard of this.
Yeah.
No, it never left the shelf. So a couple of months later, I just ended up buying it. And what happened was, when I saw it wasn't selling any copies, I said, I'm going to look up like the Metacritic scores, like what's going on with this game.
Well, I want to briefly mention too that I was talking to your brother, Nick. He saw like the cover art for the first time. He's like, what the fuck? It's like, it makes it seem very, very. I mean, it is a grim game in parts, but it makes it seem like
it's more of a horror game
like
than it
Condemned or something like
exactly.
that. Yeah. So go ahead.
So like when I bought this, I looked it up on Metacritic and I was like, wait a minute, some companies are giving this 100. Some company, like I believe Destructoid gave it 100.
Yeah.
And IGN gave it a 20.
Right.
Or a 2 out of 10 and a 10 out of 10. I said, all right, I have to play it. And so that was I had no introduction to this game at all. I had never heard of it. And I said, it's so polarizing.
Well, yeah. And that's incredible too, because I would say this is definitely one of the more impactful game experiences I've had in the last 10, 15 years.
Exactly.
And it's like at IGN 2 is like, it's like something that an IGN would give like a 9 or 10. I would just completely forget about. And this is like stuck in my brain forever.
Yeah, but, of course.
No, so I want to point out that we are going to be reviewing the Xbox 360 version. There is a director's cut, which I believe worked out pretty well on PS3, but I tried to play it on PC and it did not start at all.
Yep.
I've heard a lot of unfortunate things about bugs and crashes on the PC version. So I didn't play that one. I borrowed your copy and here we are. So all our complaints are going to be for that version of the game.
Sure. And the 360 original version is, and according to the fans, the ideal version to play.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Because there also a Switch version came out called Deadly Premonition Origins.
Yep.
So I'm not sure if that one's any better, any worse. Who knows? But all of our praise and criticism are going towards that. Getting into right off the bat some surface level presentation, aesthetic stuff, as we usually do. So right off the bat, I want to say that the textures are absolutely atrocious.
Well, this game started development in 2004, and it definitely looks like it.
Yes, it looks like it. It feels almost completely drained of color, which almost kind of works in its favor because like red is a big theme in this series, like the presence of the color red. And it kind of does lend itself well to like having that contrast, but it's very like just driving around the world, it looks like really abysmal.
It's hard to describe. This game looks bad.
Yeah.
Like, it's bad.
There's like, I was describing, you go to a lumber yard at one point, and there's a bunch of like wood shavings all over the place, and it's like painful to look at.
I mean, it's just, if you want to put this in your brain, like if you look at what awesome looking games came out at that time, like Assassin's Creed 2,
Mass Effect 2,
yeah, and then
even
there's
BioShock 2,
and
like
there's this.
Yikes! All right. Something else that I didn't notice before, maybe you did, is that characters' voices are quieter when they're not on screen.
No,
It's kind of like, because so there's a scene early on where characters are shouting at each other I'm going to get into it, but they're shouting at each other from far away. And I was like, oh, that's really cool that they're doing it that way where you can't hear them if they're not on screen. That happens the entire game.
Oh, yeah.
So it's another funny little quirk. In particular, though, while we're on audio, the voice acting and dialogue, I would say in this game are generally really good.
Which is, this game is incredibly bizarre in like many definitions.
Yes, but in considering that material, the actors do a very good job.
I mean, what I mean is the production of this game is also bizarre, where, you know, the visuals are atrocious, but the voice acting is amazing.
Yes.
It's really strange.
So before we get too far, obviously, I want to mention, I'm going to be citing it a couple times in these episodes. We did interview Jeff Kramer, who plays Francis York Morgan, the central character. A wonderful interview, great guy. Highly recommend you listen to it for a little bit of insight on these games and his life. But he, I think, understands the assignment perfectly. Apparently, he was directed personally by Swery, which is quite unique considering, you know, Japanese developer. He apparently didn't speak any English at the time, so it's awesome. So the original direction for York was literally Agent Cooper from Twin Peaks, like just do that, and that's kind of what Jeff told us. Like, you know, they were pretty much just copying the show.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Then they got into some kind of legal sticky territory, perhaps, which is kind of funny to think. I can't think of like anyone maybe CBS or whoever owns the rights or whatever I'm
don't
trying to think of like
remember
who would threaten them. It's just like fascinating to me. But it was, deemed too close for comfort. Had to re-record a great deal of lines that involved he didn't remember York's original name, but they had to literally re-record all those lines. Like
because he says his name a lot.
I'm XYZ, and then you have to re-record that. It's crazy. Jeff only also knew moment-to-moment details of the script. He didn't know where the story was going or what York's character arc was. And I think he did a great job of kind of maintaining that even keel over the course. It's like it's not quite Kyle MacLachlan as Agent Cooper. Like it's a very unique character,
right?
And it's a weird character to inhabit. And he is constantly talking to you, the player, addressing you as Zach. And you're not really sure
what's going on
there. Like, it's kind of like you're his imaginary friend,
right? Or
bit.
He's clearly got some issues.
Yes, but it's like he's a very obviously talented agent. He's and he's also very personable with you. He's a little awkward around other people, but he's friendly, and I think that's like really
right.
Maybe undersung facet of his performance there. So there was a couple weird translation localization things. None that really bothered me at all, except for one where I don't know if you recall this. There's a timed puzzle in an art gallery.
Yep.
And you have to find like some apples to put on pedestals, and it says put the blue apple here, and they really mean green. And I'm like, I don't know if that's close or whatever. That was the only time I'm like fuck, I'm dying. So what? I had to look up the puzzle. I'm like,
sure.
what is happening here? And that was like the only thing that really hung me up. Certain other things that are just maybe funny on purpose, maybe not. Things I noticed like right off the bat when I played this. You get like a certain point, a can of pickles, and it just says "the pickles" on it, which is incredible.
Oh my god!
Other weird things. I was messing around with the settings, and there is like I don't remember how they describe it in the game. It's like sensitive content or gore or something like that, and it's like, oh, so this is going to change the blood color. I think that's the implication. Sure. And you can only choose between green and purple. It's like, I think they must have run into some weird like censorship thing where it's like, let's just stick to that.
How do we get this to come out in Australia? Okay,
yes,
purple.
Yes, indeed. There is a lot of like, it's kind of notable that I believe the combat was a last minute.
Isn't that fascinating? Because we're going to get into all the details, but when you think about how this game plays out and how much combat there is,
yes.
I can't believe that combat was a last minute addition.
No, but I mean, you can tell.
Like, I mean, yeah, sure. But
it's the most like
how much there is,
it's
a significant part of the game.
Yeah, I think I have my suspicions that they were kind of padding out the length a little bit.
Sure.
Like, I don't know. So it's basically like, at random intervals, in certain locations, things will get like hazy or,
Silent
foggy.
Hill, otherworldly.
Yeah. I think they literally call it the otherworld, and you wind up getting attacked by sort of like zombie-ish
zombie ghosts.
People. Yeah. And I think they're a little startling initially.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
But like by the time you see like the 50th one,
I don't know. It doesn't really. Doesn't the main character actually have a definition for what they are? Doesn't he say something?
Well, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
I think there is a selection of trading cards you can collect, and I think they're just called the Shadows.
Oh yeah, something like that.
But it's very funny to me that this game has incredible voice acting across the board, but these enemies only have like
3 lines.
It's like, I don't want to die.
Yeah, exactly. And
I saw you.
And this game essentially plays like a shitty Resident Evil 4.
Yes,
over the shoulder.
So I should clarify that the majority of the game, you're kind of driving around town, talking to people, doing this or that. There's like a few puzzles, but not many.
Yeah.
And you get into these lengthy third-person shooter combat segments with like ghosts that feels, we'll get into it, but it feels very divorced from the
Of course.
rest of the experience. One last little quirk I noticed this time is that, I don't know, did you ever drive in first person?
Yeah.
So I was amazed that the windshield wipers actually do something. Like, because you'll get rain build up on your windshield and you flick them on and it clears it. And also, there's like a button for everything when you're driving. And you have a blinker that is ultimately completely useless, but what I found notable was that you turn them on and off like the way you would in real life. Like, say you have your left blinker going, you have to hit right on the D-pad, like to flick the switch back
Why is
up.
that even a feature?
I don't know, but it's possible that this was like a very super duper ambitious thing. Like, you wanted to implement even more stuff.
And they just had to go right down to basics to get it out the door.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a cute little feature that I've never seen before. So I just want to, before we move on, I want to ask you, what do you think would be, what sort of presentation issues do you think would be make or break for people like who want to?
Oh, I mean,
like who are thinking about playing this.
The frame rate when you're driving is so oppressive, and the the texture pop-in is so bad. It's hard to look at.
Yeah.
And just running around, the texture quality is so low.
Yeah.
And I think when this game came out in 2010, we were at the time where the graphics game was still going hot. People were trying to get better and better and more photorealistic.
Yeah, there's less emphasis on it now.
Yeah, but dude, this game looks like a PlayStation 2 game, and a lot of people can't get over that. Where the texture quality is so low and the pop-in is so bad, and the frame rate is like unplayable, or I guess it's so hard to look at. Yes,
I would say so. I just played this again. I think I first played it 4 years ago at your urging, because I didn't even tell the audience how I discovered this game. Someone sent me a YouTube video of the diner scene.
Oh, with the sandwich?
Yes.
Yeah,
and
it's amazing.
I need to play this. And you finally got me to finish it.
Yeah.
So that was great. So yeah, just kind of getting into this. I don't know if you've heard anything about Deadly Premonition. If you're somebody who is easily bothered by these types of things, maybe an issue. But for my money, I believe the rest of the game kind of makes up for it.
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna get into how the game plays, all the different systems, stuff like that. Things you have to manage, health, heart rate. Is a big one, and I think it's kind of funny because I've read some fan theories about how in both of these games you can't run very far because he's a smoker. I thought that was really funny.
I didn't think about that.
But you can kind of so you'll get winded, you can't run anymore for a time. You can take some items that stabilize. There's a stabilizer drug or something.
Yep.
But you also have to manage your hunger and your sleep. So all these things play a part. There is also a little bit of extra motivation to shave because your character will accumulate a beard over the course of
it's so weird.
Days. I mean, so this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking he's like, all right, it's gonna be very, very realistic. You know, like all these little concepts here and there and I think they do make it feel more vibrant and full of life than it otherwise would.
But I think one of the funniest things about this game is every little task you do for some reason earns you money. Like shaving, it's really strange.
You get a bonus for being a clean agent or something.
It's really weird.
And showering as well, and cleaning your
suits.
Clothes. Maybe I think no, showering is only in the second one. It's just cleaning your suits, getting them laundered, right? And something really funny that I noticed about this is that when your clothes get dirty, it implies that you're being swarmed by flies.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I think the motivation here was that they would be too small to properly convey. So the model is clearly a bee. So you're being swarmed by bees whenever you smell.
It's really weird.
So it's kind of quirky that way. Your money and time must also be managed in terms of there's NPCs have schedules. You have certain things that you need to buy to keep yourself going, etc. Movement and aiming sucks the big one.
It leaves something to be desired. I think.
Is very. I mean, in the Xbox 360 version, I understand it was improved in the director's cut, but it was I forgot how
bad it is.
How rough this was.
I mean, it's like a shitty Resident Evil 4, essentially. Over the shoulder.
And it's very like tank kind of control.
Yep, and there's actually an aspect of like ammo management and inventory management because you get different guns and stuff.
Yeah, so. not your main pistol though.
Yeah.
That always has infinite ammo, and I feel like if that was limited, that might be.
This game would be so like oppressive to play. No
way. Yeah. I think they really. They give you enough like melee weapons and stuff.
That's true. I forgot about that too.
It's a good amount of, I don't know. I think more limitations would have helped. But anyway, I did not remember the lock-on mechanic when I first played this.
Mm-hmm.
And what is so funny about it is that it exclusively aims at like the crotch area.
Why?
Because I believe at least there's a lot of enemies that bend over backwards at you.
Yep.
And it's just one of those things where I could see them like, you know, you'd be able to toggle like and sometimes in you know, Elden Ring, Souls, whatever, you can toggle like a boss's area that you're targeting. I imagine that was what they had in mind, but they're just right at the crotch.
Right.
I don't know. It didn't help me that much. Something that I did find interesting, though, was that in spite of the combat being a kind of late add-on, Swery considers it an important aspect of the experience. And I'm not sure how truthful that is, or maybe he's come around on it.
Well, I think that just when I think about how this game plays and, you know, how it plays out, there just wouldn't be enough game. If you're just talking to people and doing nothing.
I think I would have liked it better.
I know it's hard to say because we can't play it without the shooting.
But I'm imagining they're gone and it's better.
Well, maybe there was just like, there was no aspect of failure, so he had to put it in.
Well, how many hours of the game do you think the shooting sections?
It's so hard to say, right? 8 to 10, maybe more.
I would definitely put it in the hours.
Yeah.
Like it kind of takes a little while.
It's a chunk of the game.
Some other kind of odds and ends here. The metal pickups, like the Agent Honor, you kind of like running over them. It's so funny because something else that is really amusing is I was showing one of the opening cutscenes to my friend, and they were pointing out that one of these medals is visible in the background, and you don't have an opportunity to pick it up. Like you are going to see that no matter what, and it's so funny that it's just there and neither of the characters are acknowledging it. So that is another way you can earn money. I mentioned the character trading cards.
There's just some very strange like arcadey things, like everything earning you money, you picking up medals. This game is just very, very odd.
It's like it's super serious sometimes and super gamey at other times.
Yes.
What did you think of? There's a toolbox in this game that is sort of like an item box, but you can just automatically send stuff to it.
Sure, I think like they're trying to do the item box thing in Resident Evil,
and so
right?
Do you think it's better or worse that you can just send stuff to it?
I think the game would be even more annoying if you couldn't, because it's kind of
like in a better game it might make more sense.
Right. I think what happened was because the action sequences are linear.
Yeah.
If you couldn't do that, there just might be items littered on the floor, and you have to leave stuff behind. It would be so like it's already visually a disaster. I think you have to do something.
Yes, I suppose so. There are a handful of QuickTime events. The combat ones, I would say, kind of suck. Very frustrating. At one point, you have to like run away and you have to move the stick back and forth. That's really annoying. But I do like there is something where you can it's dialogue oriented, where you can either say something or just let the timer run out. It's a little bit of a telltale kind of thing. I think if expanded, that would have been great. Like I think it's a good idea, but it could have been a great one. Like, cause you know, if you feel like engaging with it, you can. If not, just skip it.
Do you remember the QuickTime event? There's like there are enemies that like shoot like dark clouds at you, and you can roll out of the way.
Yes,
but like it hits you anyway. But it doesn't do any damage.
Those enemies, I think they show up around like the halfway point. They're the only other like
the enemies on the ceiling.
Yes, they crawl out of vents, and they're generally like pretty scary, pretty creepy, and you have to like quick time every time you fight them. It's really frustrating. There is a fishing mini game. It's sort of works like I don't know, like a slot machine, kind of, and then you just whatever you get out of it. There was a kind of a funny localization moment there. You caught a garbage, which entertained me very much. At certain points, you get quizzed on like the details of the case, which I did like. Because you can kind of answer wrong and he'll be like, no, Zach, like this, like, cause it's kind of like telling you like to getting you to pay attention.
There were like some moments where like it's asking you to dissect the case. And if
like, what do you think is such
who do you think is the suspect? Who should we go question? And he'll tell you you're wrong.
It's almost like an old like 90s like adventure game. Or
right.
Like,
it's really interesting.
You know, what do they call it? Choose your own adventure book. Maybe something like that. Big problem I had, the map way too zoomed in to be useful.
Sure.
Wind up having to sort of trace like the road you're on. Like, how am I going to get to this point? Some things are marked, like your main objective is marked, but you really have to kind of know which route you're going to take is very frustrating. So I think that, I mean, that's one of my main kind of, because you do a lot of like, especially if you mess around with some of the quests, you really have to know, how everything is laid out and how it works. There is a mini map, at least in the director's cut. I'm not really sure how much better that worked, but is an acknowledgement that they did try to fix it. Something that I would have liked would be like sort of a bomber's notebook from Majora's Mask.
Yeah.
Where you kind of keep track of people's schedules and like quests.
But it's just all over the
rewards.
place.
It's very like, there is a quest log, air quotes, but it's very kind of like, I don't know. I had a hard time kind of deciphering what it was trying to, like some quests are only available on certain missions, days, etc. So that was kind of frustrating. I don't know. What about you? Do you have any other maybe quality of life improvements you would have liked to see?
That's a wow. I mean, the whole thing.
No. I mean, like in terms of systems, mechanics, things that would have made it like forget about aesthetics, all that stuff.
Do you know the thing about this game? That listen, I adore this game, but I also found some of the mechanics to be kind of worthless.
Yes.
Which is like, like the tiredness and hunger meters.
Yeah.
If you play through the story and you just go through the story, those are just filled for you. Like, because you eat,
go to sleep,
you eat meals as like a part of the cinematics.
Well, and you can also go to the sheriff's station, and Thomas always prepares meals for you. So you don't really have to worry about it that much.
Well, I feel like, then again, because the texture quality is so low, you can't read street signs. Like, you have no idea where you're going. I just think they tried to make the town so big, and without a mini map, I'm just trying to follow the little compass with how many meters away I am as best as I can.
Yeah,
right?
it's until you get a really good feel, because it's a very wide spread out.
Yeah,
I think
very
the
wide.
map is like, for a game like this, it's a pretty important thing. So I'm just going to let's kind of try to avoid story characters here. Going to mention some of the side characters who have nothing to do with the story. I'm going to say my favorites. Maybe you can weigh in on yours. Something important about this I want to note is that the side quests, not all of them, but most of them offer both meaningful character development and rewards that improve your gameplay experience on a granular level.
Right.
Like it changes the game like unbelievably.
Yep.
The character of George, you find a flower that his mother likes. And when you give it to him, he's very like kind of flattered, and he gives you a radio. And this unlocks fast travel.
I didn't even know fast travel was in the game.
It's unbelievable how much
I can't believe I'm learning something about this.
Yes, and it's so otherwise you would just have to drive.
I drove everywhere.
Wherever. You basically, what happens is you select this item. It's kind of like there is also a flare item where if your car runs out of gas, that's another thing that can happen.
Yep.
Or gets destroyed, like you're driving like around the police cruisers. If that happens, you take out a flare and a new one is brought to you, right?
Right.
So that's what I thought this was going to do, because flares are a finite item.
Yeah.
This literally opens up a menu of places you've already been, and you can just pick one, and you'll show up there, and like almost no time will have elapsed.
Wow.
And it's such a meaningful, like in terms of like, I feel like so often side quests in games are like
Useless.
just bullshit.
Well, this game in particular, it's really interesting how useful a lot of these side quests are, even though like it's a lot of menial weird shit.
Something that bothered me, I don't know if you messed around with this or know about it at all, but there are some missions where you can like cook with Emily, one of the main characters, but you can only do it on rainy nights. And it's like that. The weather is something we don't really talk. It's not a huge factor. All the businesses are closed when it rains, but it's hard to like say you really want to get all the quests done or whatever.
Right.
It's like a pain in the ass to like, well, it's not raining tonight. It's not raining tomorrow night.
Do you think it comes from the game originally being Rainy Woods and Rain was a mechanic?
Yes.
Maybe.
So an interesting thing about that though is that when you finish this quest line, you get an item that can make it rain or not.
Oh, is this
And
Ocarina of Time now? Is that
Yes.
it's you get the Ocarina of Time. That's great.
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of stuff like that where it's something that I like about games a lot, where you have these things that affect like the actual
World. You can manipulate the environment.
And I mean, at that point, I feel like it's useless because that's the only thing I would use it for.
Right.
But that's kind of notable. And last but not least for me, the side quest involving the general. I don't know if you remember this character. He runs the junkyard. And what happens is you get a tip from, I think, the guy who runs the gas station that early on your car gets wrecked that you're driving out to
Greenville.
Yeah, out to Greenville with. And you find out from the gas station guy that your car is in the junkyard. And what happens is this opens up a quest line with this guy called the General, who you have to like do some errands, like find some stuff for him in the junkyard, and he will gradually build your car back up and make it better.
Yep.
And at the end of it, you get your own car back. And it's so funny because I would say that the general driving is really like unpleasant in this game. But when you get your own car back, it handles like a dream.
Do you think this was on purpose?
If it's gotta be, right?
Right.
Like it handles, it's so much easier to turn around, to speed up. It's such a funny thing. Like you want functional driving, you got to do a couple side quests.
Isn't that bizarre?
I love it. I think it's incredible. But one other thing is really funny is every time that you go back to him, he tells you a little fable about this guy and his squad called Crybaby Timothy. And he's like, you're starting to act like Crybaby Timothy again. And you find out, I think what happens is he's a general, but he's wearing a sergeant's uniform. Mm-hmm. And what happened is he winds up telling a story about, I don't remember if Timothy was the sergeant, but there was a sergeant in his squad who died. And he winds up wearing like that jacket. So he gets a little story arc. Like you find out a little bit more about this guy. Do you have any other like non-story related side characters you'd like to talk about?
I don't know if you consider this person a main character, but there's one cinematic in particular that it was actually my first distinct memory of the game. I was young when I played that. I was like 18. And I remember, you know, the innkeeper lady?
Yeah.
I don't know if you consider her kind of a main character, kind of not.
Yeah.
My favorite, I really want to talk about my favorite cinematic. There are a lot of them in this game.
Yeah.
I love the cinematic when she either like makes you breakfast or makes you coffee one morning, but you're sitting at a dining room table that's huge.
Yes.
And so you're like shouting back and forth at each other because you can't hear each other.
Yeah.
But what they do this weird thing where the music is also too loud.
Yes.
Like the soundtrack is playing too loud.
I think doesn't he make a little joke about that?
Right. Where he's like, I can't hear you. And I'm
Yeah.
like, are they trying to do a diegetic joke? I don't know what's happening, but this is the weirdest game I've ever played in my life.
Yes. And so I want to bring up that it's this ridiculously huge table. It's like the Michael Keaton Batman scene on steroids, like where he's having a date with this woman and they're at a really big table.
Right.
This is like maybe 10 times the size of that table. And it's like it's they're shouting at each other. She is like accusing him of like hitting on her.
Yep.
He's like, I am way too old for you. And I think that's the one where you see that metal spinning around.
I think so.
And it's really bizarre also because the entire wall behind them is glass. So it just looks like they're like half outside. It's such a fucking strange visual. It's unbelievable.
I remember that was one of the first moments that jumped out to me where I said, this is a weird game.
Yeah.
Like, this is a quirky
She
game.
is also always perpetually like stooped over. It's really hard to
really
look
strange.
at. But yeah, okay. Do you want to get into the story?
That's the only redeeming part of this game. So we might as well.
It's huge for me.
Yeah, me too.
So right off the bat, it's kind of a trippy introduction where they pretty much your pause menu is set in this very surreal kind of. They call it the Red Room. It kind of looks like the Twin Peaks Red Room, but it's like sort of in a forest. It's just sort of like a little hub where all your meters are displayed, your inventory, etc. This is where the beginning takes place, and you find something I noticed this time that I didn't notice before. You find a map of America with a bunch of little figurine dolls on it, and I'm gonna come back to that later. But it's gonna play into the story here. There is also a mounted deer head that moves around, and I just like it doesn't do anything. Like it's just like it just kind of like bats its eyes and stuff. And I have seen this before one other time, and it's the television show Comedy Bang Bang.
Oh my god!
And they have a talking deer head on the wall that moves around.
Okay.
Maybe they got the idea from Deadly Premonition.
I have no idea.
But I wanted to address that. After a kind of trippy intro, you're introduced to York. That's what he goes by for the most part. At the beginning of the game, I totally forgot about all this. He is speeding down the highway in the rain at night, arguing on the phone with somebody. You realize about Tom and Jerry. And he is also at the same time reviewing the case on his laptop. Mm-hmm. So this guy is like he's got like the phone and he's obviously he crashes,
right?
And it's like so I forgot that those were the circumstances that led to this. But something else that I noticed during this crash sequence, he almost hits two squirrels that make monkey noises. So I'm like, dude,
like,
you gotta slow down. Like there's so much shit happening right now. They hit you with one of these combat sequences right off the bat. So I didn't know like what to make of this at first. I'm like, is this what this game is? Like, what's going on?
Well, they were
here?
trying to essentially do the Resident Evil 4 thing, right? Where like,
bit,
you're in like a village and they're blah 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 blah.
I was also thinking about Alan Wake.
Yeah, you're right. That game came out
same year.
Didn't it come out later? I could be wrong.
I thought it was
Similar
were both 2010.
Time. Yep.
Anyway,
same year. I'm not sure what time.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, we mentioned at length this combat stuff was tacked on. Something funny that I thought about it after it happens, York says, "What was that all about? Doesn't matter. Some things are best left a mystery, right, Zach?" So I'm like, are they just acknowledging that this shit makes
weird?
Absolutely no sense? So shortly thereafter, you walk to town and you meet some of the central characters here. George, the sheriff, who he keeps calling King George. Mm-hmm. Emily, his deputy. Sort of your kind of love interest in this game, I guess, and a formidable character in her own right. And George's assistant, Thomas, who appears to be kind of maybe a lower level character.
Well, I want to say, before we get too far, I believe in the opening combat scenario, you run into the Raincoat Killer and have to survive a QuickTime event at the end of that sequence.
You may be right.
I believe you do.
They all blend together for me, so I couldn't tell.
So you do actually get introduced to the Raincoat Killer right before you go to town. You have to survive a button press.
And I think the Raincoat Killer is kind of a scary design.
Yes, for sure.
He's an axe,
dragging it on the ground.
Yes, great sound design there. Very uncharacteristic for this game. Sounds great. Looks great.
But back on main characters, go ahead.
Yeah, so you kind of get the impression that it's going to be like a little bit of a culture clash, like big city guy, and he's talking in his ear to Zach, and he's like, there's a really funny line where he's talking about how Emily's really pretty or something, and he's like, She's very nice to look at. Worth a trip to the primitive world for sure.
What the fuck?
He's always talking about how these people are like very low tech, and he's like he's slowly like kind of becomes more understanding.
I feel like Agent York is very nice, but he has a little bit of like a condescending attitude towards like his teammates.
I noticed that a lot this time, where he's constantly telling them to wait outside.
Right.
When he goes into places, very like there's one point. George is pretty much like, all right, York, we'll do it your way. He's like, finally, you're understanding me.
Right. I do what just popped into my brain. Like Agent York as an FBI agent versus the Heavy Rain guy. Do you remember the guy with the
Norman Jaden?
Yeah, oh my God.
This kid's gonna die. I'm going around in circles.
Zach, is that kid gonna die? Anyway.
Zach, Sean, all these people. Yeah, I don't know. Who do you think was a better agent? Probably York, right?
Probably York.
Gets a lot of shit
better
done.
Voice actor anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so you wind up. I think the next thing that happens is that scene you mentioned with the hotel owner.
Yep.
It's absolutely huge. And with something else that I noticed this time that I didn't notice last time is that his bed is also absolutely huge. It's fucking enormous. It's like it's got to be like bigger than a king.
Yeah.
It's a huge bed, and I'm like, what was the decision making here? Was it just like not scaled properly, or was it like it's just funny?
They're
like,
trying to weird you out, right? I have no idea.
Everything is like, well, not everything, but a lot of stuff is just like a little off in the way that you can't tell whether or not it was intentional.
Exactly.
It's so funny.
Exactly. Like that cutscene we were talking about with them shouting over each other and the music is too loud. Is this intentional?
Yes.
Like, I don't understand this.
I want to ask you how you feel about the way this game balances these comedic moments with the drama and like the tension and kind of there's some pretty gripping moments, I would say, later on. But in terms of would you generally give this a thumbs up in terms of how they balance it?
Do you know, that is such a great question.
Yeah.
We will talk about the end when we talk about the end.
Yeah.
But because the end is so successful, I say yes to the whole thing.
Okay.
But when I feel like what happens, can I quote you just for a moment?
Yeah.
You said, Greg, this game is 20 hours of pain and 10 hours of bliss. And what happens is...
Wow, I guess I did say that.
You did say that a couple of years ago. And what happens is when I'm first playing this game, I said, oh my God, like this game, this is horrific. Like what is going on?
Yeah.
Everything looks terrible. They're talking about B movies. Like they're just talking about Tom and Jerry.
Yes.
There are ghost zombies. What the fuck is happening?
He's a big fan of when you're driving around, you can choose to have him talk and he will mention like, this was presumably Sweary's favorite movies.
Yeah,
and he'll get
exactly.
In depth discuss them and their cultural impact.
Well,
and whatnot.
to answer your question more succinctly, like my answer is no, but because it is such a bizarre juxtaposition between the different emotions, it kind of goes back on itself, and now my answer is yes. Well, it is just so strange.
It's weird because, and I think Jeff Kramer is a big part of this, where York is like kind of like a quirky, fun character in much the way that Agent Cooper was, but in this game I feel like it surprised me with how much emotional depth there was.
Right. Well, I think as we'll go on, you start to understand that York has some issues. And like, so you almost, you know what it is? I think at the start of the game, I'm just like, man, this game blows. But what happens is you start understanding he's very quirky. He has a lot of odd behavior, and it all kind of makes sense with his character. And I think you start to find him endearing.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just sort of it's just bizarre because you don't know initially like what sort of tone they're going for.
No idea.
And it's very, it's crazy because like there's like what, like 4 tracks in the game, and they're always like, there'll be like a kind of serious moment playing out. You'll hear that like whistling song. It's like, is this funny? Like what's going on?
I don't know. I didn't think this was funny, but okay.
Yeah. So I was just curious to get your thoughts on that because it is a factor in this game. So what winds up happening is the initial victim, Anna, she is found by this farmer and his 2 grandsons in a tree. This is like the attract video of when you're starting the game. She's found like strung up in a tree, been horribly murdered. They wind up going to the hospital and checking on her body in the morgue. And what winds up happening is that York discovers a red seed in her mouth, and this helps him connect it to another string of cases that he's been working on.
Yep.
Very reminiscent of Twin Peaks with the letters underneath her fingernails.
Right. Well, I mean, we should say like the exposition to this game was you're an FBI agent who's come to Greenville, Washington to solve the murder of Anna, essentially.
Yes.
That's the basic premise.
And you realize that like, so basically he assumes jurisdiction here because it's part of a larger case. I think around this point, I want to get into the characters of Michael and Mr. Stewart. Do you want to talk about these guys a little bit?
You can start, but I love them.
So very interesting. You meet them very early on. This guy is Mr. Stewart. His subtitle every time you meet a new character, the screen freezes and you see, like Harry Stewart, and you have a little subtitle, and his subtitle is Mysterious Capitalist. Yeah. And so he's finally dressed in this nice suit. He's in a wheelchair. And he is wearing a gas mask that is like, it looks like a skull.
Yeah, it's really weird.
So this is another one of those things I was thinking about. I don't know whether it's intentional, where could they not like render a nice like gas mask for him? Like, why does it look like a skull? Like, it's so weird.
I think they're pouring on the weird.
Yeah.
But, I mean, do you remember I used to do this to you? I used to... because Mr. Stewart's attendant, his name is Michael.
Yes.
Michael always, like, when he talks to you, he's either always saying a rhyme,
yes,
or he's always saying, and so says Mr. Stewart.
At the end of every conversation.
Something like, what was, like, even with that diner scene, like, we're having, like, a tasty lunch. I think you'll like it a bunch. Like, it's really, so says Mr. Stewart.
Yeah.
It's really strange, but I actually love them.
No, yeah. It's very funny, sincerely, like, on purpose. It works very well. For me, it could have gotten annoying in the wrong hands. I think it's a great performance, but essentially, Mr. Stewart he has these weird kind of like things attached to his neck or something, so you get the impression that he can't speak very loudly. He winds up whispering to his attendant, and his attendant speaks for him.
Yep,
and everything is in rhymes. And something else that I noticed is that when you talk to NPCs out in the world, they don't always have fully voiced lines.
There's a lot of text.
All of his text is rhymed as well. So they at least put the effort into writing, interesting things, even if it wasn't voice acted. Yeah. And I did like that a lot. There's some really, really funny ones I was sending to the group chat. I can't remember right now, but they're definitely a big draw for me, these characters.
What I actually really like about, before we move on to the next character, do you remember when, like, whenever Michael and Mr. Stewart arrive, they say, Mr. Francis York Morgan. Yes. They always address you the same way, too, which is interesting.
Yeah, you get the impression that they maybe know a little bit more about what's going on than everybody else.
Yep.
Early on, I wanted to mention, they kind of rehash this a lot as it goes on, but the first time it happens, I like it a lot, where you're in the lumber mill and you have to hide from the raincoat killer. Very tense.
Right, because you can only like hold your breath for so long, and you're watching your heart rate increase as he's approaching the door.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you actually, correct me if I'm wrong, you actually get a little, I don't know if we've ever talked about this on the show, you actually get a little bit of what I would call second person gaming, where you are looking through the eyes of the person looking for you.
Yes, it goes into like picture in picture.
Yes,
and you see, I think, what you can see as well as
what the monster sees, or what the raincoat killer sees, which I believe would be second person gaming.
Yeah, that's pretty. That is pretty unique.
Yep.
I think at this point you somehow find out, I think through a photograph, that the raincoat killer has this inverted peace sign on their back, like a tattoo, presumably.
Yep.
So the first thing he does, he walks out of the lumber mill. York walks out of the lumber mill, and he asks George and Emily to see their backs. He's like, it would just really help me rule you out. And so they put up a fight, of course, but eventually they give in. And so Emily's totally normal. George, you find out, has a bunch of scars on his back.
Yep.
Which is very, kind of concerning. Like, what's this guy been through?
Yep.
You know, and he's like, yeah, it's just an old injury from my youth or something, or
Yeah, he tries to play it off.
He's a very tough kind of guy.
Yep.
They clash a lot in that way. And Thomas, the assistant, has a tattoo that says "Love G," which we'll get into later. But it's a little plant there. So at this point, they gather all or most of the civilians of Greenville to the community center. York is going to do a presentation, just say, these are the facts. We believe we're dealing with a serial killer, etc. Be cautious, stay indoors, don't go out too late or whatever. And something I found interesting about this is really like setting up. It's introducing you to all the possible people it could be.
Yep.
And I was curious if you had any thoughts at this point, the first time you played it, as to who the killer might be.
So I think they're trying to. I think what they make clear is that Mr. Stewart and Michael know something about what's going on.
Yeah,
and so
they are at this meeting too.
Right. So I think my first impression was, not that I think it's Mr. Stewart, or maybe is he almost ringleadering this, telling other people to kill people, that sort of thing.
Oh, sure.
Almost like I'm not going to have blood on my hands sort of rich guy.
Yeah.
I think they do that on purpose, and that was my initial impression.
Well, yeah, he's wearing like a skull as like his mask. He's a very creepy guy.
It's almost one of these I don't even know how to say this the right way. It's almost like they're putting in your face that he's mysterious and they want you to suspect him, and for good reason.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So, I developed a guess that I'm not going to say because it turned out to be correct.
Wow.
Keep in mind, we're going to spoil this whole thing. So before we get any further, maybe just if you sound intrigued and you want to get into it based on our recommendation, shut this off right now, pause it.
Right.
Come back to it once you play it.
I want to say one thing before we go on. I do think the story in this game is incredible, and I love it a lot. So I am very passionate about this. So why don't we continue? You've been given the spoiler warning. Let's do it.
We're going to get into it. Yes. So moving on here. Before we completely get off Harry Stewart and Michael, this diner interaction that got me into this game.
I love this.
It's an incredible sequence of events where York and Emily are at the diner and they see them come in, and Harry orders what is the sandwich? It's turkey.
You're talking about the Sinner sandwich?
The Sinner sandwich.
It's turkey, cornflakes, and strawberry jam, or it's raspberry jam.
Yes.
One of those.
And they York and Emily talk amongst themselves about. York calls it the Sinner sandwich, that he's atoning for a past life of.
So York has a quote where he said, "The Sinner sandwich." Mr. Stewart is atoning for past sins.
Right, and. What does Michael say? Like don't be so judgmental. Effectively,
right.
Give it a try or something. And York, being the adventurous guy that he is, he tries it and he goes, "Wow, this is good." And this like upbeat punk song starts playing,
and everyone has this. You can't see like the look on my face, but everyone almost gives the Cookie Monster face, like whoa.
Yeah, Emily and the waitress are like, "Oh my god,
it's
like,
really strange."
Have you ever tried the Sinner sandwich?
No, but I keep tweeting at Babish for him to make it, but he hasn't done it.
Oh my god. I don't know if I could bring myself to try it.
You know what though? People put like fruit into salads with meats now. You know what I mean? Like
well,
there's like blueberries.
It's kind of almost
salads.
like a Thanksgiving sort of feeling.
It's
the
just
cornflakes are the odd duck there.
It's very odd.
So yeah, I just want to mention that. Later on at the diner, I do want to mention a very funny scene where they're asking the rest of the sheriff and the other officers, they're asking York about past cases.
Yeah.
And they're like, what kind of stuff have you seen? And he's seemingly, York has seen a lot of shit.
Yeah.
And at one point, he's like, they're just eating dinner. He's like, yeah, one guy I was investigating, he was using people's skulls as cups for his urine. It's just It's like, oh my god, dude, what is wrong with you? And this line is forever ingrained in my memory. Emily says, Agent York, some people are trying to eat here. And he goes, I know, Emily, I'm one of them.
Amazing.
Just incredibly off the cuff. So at this point, I actually got to know this character a little bit more this time. Anna's best friend, Becky. You can do like a couple of small quests. It seems like that they're kind of, were maybe involved with rough crowds, like kind of like drug dealers or something like that. And so she's very secretive. She doesn't really open the door for you. And she winds up being the second victim.
Yep.
So something happens where like we got a tip something's going on at Becky's house or something,
Yep.
and you wind up having to drive through the rain to her house, and it's very tense. Really cool moment. And what you wind up doing is you have another of these awful action sequences. But at the end of that, you find her. She's in her bathtub, like strung up in this weird kind of wire device with like the shower curtains or something. And what happens is you realize that it's sort of a trap. And what winds up happening is that George is trying to get her down, and he cuts like a wire that sets off the trap and kills her.
Where she wasn't actually dead.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't realize it at first, and she gets like strangled or something, and it's becomes the second victim. So the stakes are raised at this point, I would say. And you wind up talking to, I think at this point I was like, it hadn't fully set in how creepy the kids are.
Yeah, the twins.
You wind up having to talk to them. It's very, very strange.
Mm-hmm. They talk about like the angel in the forest and that sort of thing.
Yeah, they show up in your dreams sometimes.
Yeah, it's really strange.
It's so bizarre. They're like little angels. So they were the first witnesses, I guess, to the murder. And what winds up happening, as I mentioned, also there's an art gallery with a. The owner is kind of connected to these girls as well. And she is, I think they imply that she's having affairs with several people in town. Mm-hmm. Number one, including a character who is introduced around this time called Forrest Kaysen.
Yep.
And so he is this just sort of big kind of like doofy guy, I guess. And he's got, he's always carrying a little potted plant with him, and he has a Dalmatian the whole time that's following him. So he seems like kind of just like this bumbling, like idiot character, I guess. And so it's weird, like they basically show that she is having an affair with him.
Yep.
And when you get to the art gallery, he is locked in her basement.
Yes.
He's like, let me out of here.
Right.
And but what else you learn is that she was also involved with the chef of the diner, Nick Cormack.
Yep.
And so you wind up tailing him because you think that his wife is the waitress, says he's been acting suspiciously. I think maybe that's how you get there. Yeah. And you tail him to the art gallery. And what winds up happening is this woman, Diane, she is suspended over this giant like tree sculpture.
Yep, this spiky tree thing.
Yeah, that kind of looks like the tree that Anna was strung up in front of. And so what winds up happening here is that I forgot York does this incredible like leap and jumps and saves her.
Yep.
And it seems like, interrupts the killer's plan.
Yeah.
Right. And at this point, everything is pointing towards this guy Nick as being the killer. And obviously I feel like I wasn't buying it at the time. He's just kind of like, he seems like wrong place, wrong time kind of situation. And what winds up happening is the giant sculpture, through a comedy of errors, winds up falling on Diane, killing her.
Yep.
And something really cool, I sent you a picture of this. It's like a very cinematic shot of like when it falls, it creates the peace
the
symbol.
peace sign. Yep.
So cool.
Yep. This is actually the point in the game, maybe it was the bathtub, where I said I think this game is actually serious.
Yeah, there were I mean, like whenever it it gets into it, like lingers on the moment without cutting a joke in anywhere, and it's like, oh god.
Yeah, this is a serious game.
It's pretty heavy duty at times. So something interesting, you kind of have a little bit of a debrief with George, the sheriff, at a nightclub where Thomas's sister Carol is a singer.
Yep.
And you kind of just like have a little powwow with him, and York says, "George, this wasn't your fault." And George winds up opening up to him, and he says, "Listen, it's this stuff like this really bothers me. I had a very traumatic childhood.
Scars on the back.
Scars on his back were from his mother.
Yep. Okay.
Single mother, used to beat him with a stick, etc." Very like sincerely acted for a game that is ridiculous.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And it's like, man, this guy has been through a lot of shit. And I think what winds up happening next is you go to sleep after this, and in your dreams you meet this mysterious person, and it's this guy who is standing up, and he's wearing an all-white suit, just like an older guy, and he doesn't say anything. And something I did notice this time that I don't think I noticed last time is that he has the little canisters on his neck.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you realize this is
Mr.
Harry.
Stewart. Yep.
And it's that's awesome to me.
Yep.
That like in your deep like subconscious, like you're visualizing what this man must have looked like when he was walking around and stuff. I think that's so cool. And so the next day, you go back to the giant table. And he's got his newspaper out, and what winds up happening is she serves him his coffee. And we didn't even mention, because we already kind of glazed over that, FK in the coffee.
Yeah, of course.
That was in the first scene where they're shouting at each other. York sees the letters FK in the foam
of his coffee.
In his coffee.
Yeah, the two letters FK.
And he doesn't know what to make of it at first, and it kind of pervades the rest of the game. You have a shirt that says this.
I have a shirt that says FK in the coffee. I have had many employers who have asked me not to wear a shirt that says fuck to work.
Fuck in the coffee. I have no idea what they were thinking with that.
Me either.
In any case, really cool that I forgot about the coffee cup leaves a stain on the newspaper, and it spells out Harry. And the first letter of each word spells out Harry. So he's like, okay, so
we got to go to Harry's
the
mansion.
Dream and this. We gotta see what's going on with him. And he has a mansion kind of on the outskirts of town. He has a really cool room that I forgot about. It's one of those big glass walls, but it's in front of a waterfall. Yeah, it's like very like James Bondy almost. Very interesting.
And this combat section has some puzzle solving in it too.
Yes,
this is kind of a strange section.
You kind of you have like a rotating room that Michael is like, Mr. Stewart awaits you in the next room. It's some stupid rhyme, whatever. But he's like playing keys on a piano, and you have to figure out a way to him. And he essentially tells you need to find some red seeds, because that's what's linking all these cases together. So you find them in like the graveyard, I believe, and you bring it back. I thought the scene was really funny. York just walks in and opens his hand and drops them all on the floor.
It's like, I wouldn't do that.
I would, you can just present them in your hand. They'll do the same job. So this sequence, this, for me personally, I'm going to ask you how you feel about it, but this initial scene where you get Harry's side of the story, he finally turns on his little like voice box or whatever and speaks to you. This, did you see something like this coming where you get like lore? I did not at all.
Well, I think what I expected was he was connected to the killing. What I didn't expect was it's really kind of weird. He kind of manipulates you into coming to find him just to help you.
Yes.
Which I don't then, and he gives you some history like about the town too, and like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So effectively what you find out here is that this is actually the second Raincoat Killer.
Yeah.
The first one was, I believe, 50 years prior.
Is this the moment where you also get that playable cinematic, or is that later?
Not playable?
Yep.
That comes later.
Yep. Okay.
But it's the same time period.
Yep.
I think so. This takes place in the 50s or 60s.
It's the 50s. Yeah.
Yeah. And essentially, what you find out was that the United States government was doing experiments
in Greenville.
And they wound up at one point. It's unclear at the time whether it was intentional or something went wrong, and they wound up releasing this purple gas on the town, and it turned everyone like feral. Like violent.
Essentially almost like the intro to that third Batman game, right? Where everyone's just attacking each other.
Yes. Or Resident Evil 6 on the plane.
Exactly.
So
essentially that's why he wears the gas mask.
Because he says that the town is tainted.
Yep.
And that there is something in the air and the water.
Yep.
And he says when it rains, strange things happen.
And like the fumes come up and that sort of thing.
Not only that, I thought it was incredible that at first I was like, wait, why is everywhere closed when it rains? And this is why.
Because of that. They don't want anyone out in public
it's
when
so
it happens.
Fucking cool.
Yeah, I mean, didn't you... for me, I'm getting some chills right now thinking about it, but at every progressive, serious moment, I kept saying, is this a good game? I think this is a good game. And then when you talked to him, I said, this is actually a very good game.
A great game.
Yeah.
I mean, because I brought this up in our Jeff Kramer interview, but... Twin Peaks is very kind of feel oriented, where it's like a lot of like things don't really have a concrete meaning. Like sometimes the story progresses non-linearly.
Yeah.
And it's very much because David Lynch is very kind of the guy who taps into your subconscious.
Yeah,
I guess.
Of course.
I did not expect this game to do kind of the opposite, where there is a reason for probably why everyone acts so weird. There's a lot of really weird people in town.
Yeah, there could be something that they were ingesting or breathing.
Like, do you remember, I don't know if we talked about this on our Silent Hill podcast, but that town in Pennsylvania where they had the gas
Centralville or something, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
And it's perpetually foggy, but it's also like unlivable because the fumes will fuck with you. So
they're definitely pulling from that.
Oh, for sure. But I thought the scene was awesome where you basically, so he was a young man at the time, and he says there was a really strong man and he was killing everybody else, and this was the original
raincoat killer,
and he reveals to you that this was his father.
Yep.
And I don't remember how, I don't believe it's made explicitly clear how he was stopped, but the raincoat killer stopped, the town covered it up. There are almost no records of this, very, very hush-hush, kind of a taboo to speak about it in Greenville. At this point, I think you go back to the bar, and there's a little bit of a controversial sequence here where you are knocked unconscious, right? And there's a part where York dreams of chasing his father in the woods. Reminds me a lot of Mass Effect 3.
Yep.
You're doing that thing.
Chasing the boy, yep.
Yeah. And what winds up happening here, Emily is trying to find you, and you wind up playing as Emily for a while. And what's remarkable about that is that her stamina meter never runs out because she's not a smoker.
Yep.
So Forrest Kaysen and his dog Willie wind up helping you here. Willie the Dalmatian.
We love Willie.
Willie's great. And you kind of, it's very tedious, but you wind up having to follow him pretty much across town. And it is cross-cut with his very effective... essentially what you find out is that Thomas is somehow involved with these killings.
Yeah, it's the deputy, Thomas.
Yes.
Yep.
And something that I wanted to get your thoughts on... As we proceed into 2022, we're going to have a lot more to talk about next episode. But how did you feel about the portrayal of Thomas in the last couple?
Do you mean like his portrayal of like his relationship with George and like his sexuality and that?
Yeah.
That's tough. I think...
So essentially he reveals himself to you wearing a dress, which may be surprising to some listeners, but a dress and a wig, and complete personality shift. I thought it was kind of interesting. The first time I played this, I noted that he was, when you try to talk to him at the sheriff's department, he's very sleepy during the day. So I'm like, is he up to something at night? Like, what's going on here? But something that, I had a little bit of a tougher time swallowing this time in terms of how tastefully this was portrayed.
Well, I think, now you could correct me if I'm wrong here, but before you're essentially kidnapped by Thomas, you investigate his apartment.
Yes, sorry about
and
that.
That's kind of where you get the inkling that I believe you find stiletto heels or articles of clothing that you found odd.
Yes, and something that's actually really cool is that there's a running theme of these women who are getting murdered wearing red dresses.
Yep.
And Thomas is also wearing the red dress. But when you go into his apartment, or in the otherworld version of his apartment, there's like the dresses are made from red vines.
Yep.
Which are like kind of the red associated with a red seed, which I thought was a really cool visual choice. But please continue.
So now when you play as Emily, you're following Willie the dog for what seems like forever.
Yeah.
And I believe Willie leads you to where York is, and you have a boss battle with Thomas.
Yes. So it's sort of cutting back and forth with York at this point, where he is slowly, I thought it was really good and well acted and well written, where he's realizing that he genuinely cares about Emily.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's weird for him because you don't get the impression this happens too often for him or at all, like it's like she is genuinely special to him and he's like hoping that he can see her again.
You're talking York and Emily.
York and Emily, yes.
Yeah.
And so this whole sequence where you're kind of at Thomas's mercy is so it takes place. Something else I wanted to note is it takes place in a clock tower, this part. And it's something I thought was really cool is that when you are in the other world and you open up your menu, you see the time is going backwards.
Yep.
It's just perpetually rewinding. And I thought was really cool is that the clock tower does the same thing when you're on the inside of it.
Yeah.
It's constantly winding itself backwards. But you have a boss battle with Thomas in the inner workings of this clock tower, I guess.
Yep.
And it's really like, to me, it's unclear if they're saying that Thomas is like transgender or if it's just like, cross-dressing or some other kind of,
Sure.
It seems like Swery is a little confused about how to portray this.
Sure. You're not really given a clear, I guess, narrative direction of
yes.
that.
So if trying to approach this with respect to pronouns and stuff like that, it's hard to talk about because it's kind of nebulous.
Yeah.
And in essence, just it's a little. I don't know how I feel about it now. It is not. The game I think gets better and better from here.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a low point for me. Like this character who is maybe kind of perhaps gender non-conforming is portrayed so villainously.
Right.
Where there is not really like a good person analog.
Yeah.
Of a similar orientation.
Yep.
So that's kind of a bummer. But
I just want to say to our audience, like I think we're trying to I guess handle this character and this analysis in the best way that we can, but I'm not sure what the intention was in the game. I don't really know.
It's clear in the second one when we'll get into that, of course. But so just kind of a caveat here, just so everybody is aware of what we're talking about. Kind of weird. And they suffer like an absolutely brutal death.
Yeah.
Where they try to sort of land the killing blow on Emily, and they get sort of harassed by Willie the dog.
Yep.
And what winds up happening is that they're holding a knife, and it goes up in the air, and they wind up being impaled by it.
Yeah.
Like it goes right through their chest. Face gets run through with a giant hook.
Yeah.
I'm just like, all right. So like, I don't know. It's a little. It's a bit much for like, kind of a character that I feel like could have been portrayed a little bit more sympathetically or, tastefully. Right.
Right. Well, I almost feel like Swery tried to present this character in a sensitive manner at times, but with this boss battle and the encounter, that kind of went out the window a little.
Yes.
Yep.
2010, different world for sure.
Yep.
But just kind of in terms of how this game has aged, it's a bit of a,
not really sure about this one.
Not really sure about this beat here, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
However, since Thomas had alibis for all three murders, York comes to a stunning conclusion. This is where it happens, where he realizes the true identity of the killer.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the only other person who had access to these files to tamper with them, I believe. And the only other person is our Sheriff George. So did this surprise you?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Now, because just so all of our fans out here know this, I have I'll call it a little speech prepared about sort of this point in the game on, but I want to make sure you say what you want to say before I do that.
Okay.
But I think with George, I think what Deadly Premonition has done here is they have made the killer, I don't know what the right word for this is. They have made the killer kind of obvious on purpose, where, oh, of course it's the sheriff. He did it. He's the police. He's in on the whole thing. But they try to like lull you into a sense of like you feel good about yourself because maybe you solved it a few hours ago.
Yeah.
But you should continue before I make any more speeches.
No, that is kind of the weird thing is that the Raincoat Killer has a good degree of physicality that you can't really see Thomas having.
Yeah.
So that is sort of a, let's say, red herring, I guess.
Sure.
And it's kind of, there's a couple false endings, I guess, in this where you think you've cracked the case utterly and truly. But I had a weird feeling about George because I was trying to pull off some weird quests and it was getting... Whenever it hits midnight in the overworld, it turns into otherworld, like creepy nightmare stuff happening. And it got to be like 1, 2 a.m. and I was like fishing or something. And I was trying to find like a fishing spot. And I saw George driving around one of the murder scenes at like 2 a.m. And I'm like, okay, he's the sheriff. He has a pretty good reason for,
doing
being out and about, but it is odd.
Yeah, of course.
And I thought that was really cool that they incorporated that into
his everyday life,
his everyday schedule. Is that
of course.
He's a little nocturnal, maybe.
Yeah.
For whatever he was up to. But that was what kind of made me suspect him. He's also very. You do that quest where you have to get his dumbbells at one point. That was really funny. But it's basically like his scars. When he wears a certain shirt and it exposes it in a pattern that you thought it was a tattoo at first of that inverted peace sign.
Yep.
And he's got that on his back.
So essentially you're able to stick it on him because of the scars and it makes the symbol.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible. So you wind up going to when you find out that revelation, you actually see he takes off the Raincoat Killer uniform and it's like, oh man, this is like disturbing.
Yeah.
Like this guy who I've had conversations with, you had that kind of if you did that quest where you give a flower for his mother who's ill or something, you have kind of a connection with him. So when you find out that like this is this other side of him, it's like I think it's genuinely like a little chilling.
Yeah.
So this was a big bit. When you get into the police station to go confront him at this point, nice little detail. All the police uniforms that are ordinarily hanging up are the red raincoat.
Yep.
Which is really cool. You wind up, I think, so basically the undercurrent of this is that George is undergoing some kind of ritual to achieve some type of divine power. Some
sort of immortality, some sort of power.
Something like that. And it involves some ritual where he has to kill 5 women.
Yep.
And very interesting. I didn't realize this at first. This playthrough, the 5 women that die are A, B, C, D, E.
Oh, okay.
Which is kind of interesting. So you have Anna, Becky, Carol, the singer who is in this part, Diane, and spoiler.
Yep.
So the essentially at this point you confront him, and he's like a completely different person.
He's essentially like a boss battle here. He just turns into this hulking dude.
At this point, he seems normal at first, and then so once Carol dies, Thomas's sister, that sort of completes the starts the process of the transformation, and what happens is I was gonna ask you, like, generally, like, what did you think about this part? Because it is kind of.
Do you mean the boss battle with George?
Well, so he starts out just like a really strong guy, right?
Yeah.
And then like he's wearing all this like really tough guy attire, kind of biker outfit. And then at a certain point, he effectively goes like Super Saiyan. Yeah. And his hair is made of like white light. Yeah. Just like, holy shit, dude.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I feel like they had to do something for you to defeat him, and it ended up going, he's a monster now, essentially.
So for me, I enjoy this part of the game. Yeah. Particularly this boss battle. I like it a lot more than any other combat sections up to this point. Yep. Mainly because it is, number one, it's pretty challenging. Yep. And number two, there is so much drama between the characters happening right now. Of course. And it's very interesting that, he's kind of chasing this higher power because he has he had a messed up childhood. Yeah. And he felt powerless compared to his mother, etc. And so it is, I'm just curious in terms of, so this game is like, it's odd because you do have these like otherworld moments where supernatural stuff is happening, but this feels like it makes, like, the game otherwise is pretty grounded in reality. Yeah. And this is kind of like the moment where the magic moment steps here, beyond the pale. Yep. So how did you feel about this when it happened? I mean, I think, sure, like it feels off base, but because he's a monster now, but it was okay. I think there's so much like, what's the word for this? Almost like, you've cracked it and you've got to go get him. Yeah. You feel awesome, like you've cracked this and you got to finish it. Yeah. So this is a very tough part where you have to defeat George. Very funny line when it ends that I forgot about. George says, "How can this be? I'm divine." And York says, "No, George, you're a first-degree murderer and I'm a federal agent."
And so you kill him.
And that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Well, I believe we should mention as well, like right before this happens, I believe Emily is forced.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm glad to say this. Carol is kind of she seems like she has been taken in with George, or is part of his cause. Yeah, she's a part of the cult. One of the last things she does before she dies is she shoves a bunch of red seeds in Emily's mouth. Yep. And you leave her in the care of Forrest Kaysen, who's kind of been like your bumbling sidekick, I guess. Yep. The last couple of missions, he's just kind of like tagging along, and it's just like he says take her to the hospital. Yeah. Right? So
York tells Kaysen to take Emily to the hospital while York will pursue George. Yeah. Then you have the boss battle.
So you have the boss battle with George. Another one last kind of interesting thing, George's body when he dies, the shadow it casts is the reverse peace sign, which is you kind of. I think at this point interpret to be, it's supposed to represent a tree. Yeah. Because it's like upside down. So at this point, York wakes up in the hospispital where I like the doctor.
Yeah, I love this guy.
He's a very, very good character. You can do some side quests with him. And he's just like, "Hey, how you feeling, man?" And he's like, "Hey, it's over. We never, none of us would have expected George, right?" And York is basically like, "So how's Emily doing?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" And he goes,
"Oh, dude, this point in the game, man, this is when I said, I don't know if you said this out loud, I said, oh no." Because I mean, York essentially asked the doctor, "Where's Emily?" And the doctor says, "Well, she never showed up."
Right.
Like, oh.
So it's a very like
you think you solved it. You think the game is over, but it's not.
It's one of those for me, Casino Royale, where he thinks the main villain is dead, and he thinks it's over, and then he gets double crossed, and it starts like a whole like final act of the movie.
Right, and
it's so that's effectively what winds up happening here. There's a little bit more to the game. what winds up happening is York is like, well, I need to piece this together. I need to go back to George's house.
Yeah.
And something I completely forgot about is when you go back to George's house, it's like a shithole.
Yep.
It's like none of it is, it looks like an unfinished basement,
Yep.
all of it.
Yep.
And you wind up going down to the actual basement through a secret passage. And this is a little on the nose, but you find like his mother is dead in the basement.
Yeah.
Like, you got that flower for her earlier.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, okay. So this guy was just completely fucked up. At this point, I did want to mention there is you brought it up earlier, an interactive flashback where you go back to the 50s and you play as the Raincoat Killer.
Yeah, in that scenario with the fog and the people losing their minds.
Yes. And so you're basically wandering around with the axe, just like whacking people with it.
Well,
like
you can also not kill anyone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I purposely didn't.
Oh,
because
okay.
actually the townspeople are trying to attack you back in the 50s.
And attack each other.
Really cool audio moment in this game too. Right during this actually really stuck out to me when I played it. There's a version of Amazing Grace playing, and it's slowly pulling out of tune over the course of the song, and it's very jarring. Yeah. Very interesting performance.
Right, yeah, it's very cool. As it goes on, I think it's like the clock tower, the bell is tolling.
Yeah.
And earlier, Harry tells you like it tolled 13 times, and you have to get there before it happens.
Yep.
And effectively, what you realize this time is that one of the figures unleashing gas on the town was Forrest Kaysen.
Yep. So he's been around since the 50s.
Which is like, I was like, okay,
so clearly,
what's going on?
So
here?
clearly, like Forrest Kaysen ingested some of this immortality or whatever, and has been around since the 50s.
Yes,
and he's back again.
It's insane.
Yep.
So something crazy that happens here is that you wind up, you're driving back to the clock tower, the community center, all that stuff. And it starts raining again. And as you're driving, giant like dogs,
probably representing Willie, right?
And all the townspeople like go nuts.
Yep.
And they start attacking you.
Yep.
And I had to figure out, I was like, what happens if you attack one of them and you get like a game over?
Yeah, sure.
But I forgot all about this part where they like literally everybody, including the rhyming guy.
Yeah,
he has a katana. He attacks you with.
Essentially, they're trying to recreate what happened in the 50s. And you have to. What I did this on purpose, where when I was the Raincoat Killer, I did not kill anyone, and as York, you can't. I think that was what you were supposed to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So that was pretty cool. But once you get in there, it's a real like sort of avalanche of things happening, dude. So let's take it beat by beat here.
Yeah, please, dude. I have a lot to say here too. This like broke me, dude. This was an incredible moment.
It's rough. Essentially what you wind up realizing that Forrest Kaysen, as you put together, he was FK.
Yep, Forrest Kaysen is FK in the coffee.
Yeah, and what apparently, so he has a history with York where this happened in the past to York's parents.
Yep.
Where Forrest Kaysen is like a traveling
tree salesman, a sapling
salesman. Yeah. And what wound up happening was York's mother she like ingested the red seeds or something.
So essentially, like he implanted a tree in her belly,
right,
to kill her. And when York was a little kid,
will turn her into like a monstrosity.
Of course.
Or something.
So, but when York was a little kid, he saw this happen.
Yeah.
But York's dad was also in the room and could not go through with essentially a mercy killing of the mom.
It's like sort of history repeating itself.
Of course.
Here.
Yep.
And you realize that Emily was never taken to the hospital. You are too late. And she has the same thing going on. She has like a tree.
She has a tree implanted in her belly.
Growing out of her stomach.
Yep.
And very disturbing scene. And you kind of are there's I wasn't really sure how to play this moment where you have to choose between like who you aim at. Like, 'cause the only right answer is aiming it at Emily. Right. And so when you do that, it's awesome that when this happens. I didn't realize like sort of the poetry of this at first, where it creates sort of a disharmony between York and Zach, where you are telling him to shoot her and he can't do it.
Well, I have a different interpretation of this.
What is that?
So my interpretation of this is, also visually, this was like very gripping to me, where this is the moment, I believe, when Francis York Morgan does not look like himself anymore.
Well, he swaps.
Right.
York is like an invented personality, or like perhaps he didn't ever look like that.
Well, right. So allow me to give you my interpretation of this. So essentially what happens is York the whole game looks like this very suave, sexy, like black hair, cool suit kind of guy.
Yeah.
But what you realize is that as a kid, he witnessed this horrible murder and his dad killing himself or whatever. And he sort of he is actually Zach Morgan.
Yeah.
And Francis York Morgan is Zach Morgan. Zach Morgan created this FBI persona to try to repress that memory of what happened to him as a kid.
Yeah.
And I think what I loved about this, it was so heartbreaking, was when you get your next view of York, you're in the town hall, Emily's got the tree in her, Forrest is there. What you realize is that York doesn't look cool at all. You are like a disheveled blonde weirdo. Like you're a mess.
Like platinum blonde.
Yeah, you're almost like you have like scars on your face. You look ragged.
Well, what's interesting is that in the beginning, York has like some scars from the previous case, where he says he got scratched by someone with like Catwoman claws or something. Yep. And everyone is always talking about like your scar, like wow, that scar, everyone's talking about it. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's a scar. It's not that big. So presumably like the scar that he actually has is what they're seeing.
What broke my heart about this is they kind of did the Silent Hill 2 thing, where like James is portraying himself in the world as he wants to see it. And so Francis York Morgan is also portraying to the player what he thinks he looks like. Yeah. But he does not look like a cool guy at all. He's a mess.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, man.
It's I was curious as to your interpretation of that, because it is a little nebulous.
Yep, that's what I think. I think you were shown how he wants to be seen,
right?
And then when you have this moment of clarity, you snap back to reality of what you actually look like,
right?
Because this is your repressed memory has now come back, and you're witnessing it again.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
Yep. So at this point, he is unable to shoot Emily.
Yep.
And she winds up ripping the tree out of herself, and dying. Yeah. Right then and there. And what winds up happening is you have the true final boss, and I need to ask you about this one, because if you thought the last one was crazy,
yeah.
Oh my God. So what do you think about this final boss?
I mean, you essentially fight bowling ball Kaysen and bouncy Kaysen, and then you fight giant doll Kaysen in like another world. It's really weird.
Yes. Like he turns into like a legitimate like monster.
Yeah.
Like with like this gross like tongue and like purple skin, and it's very out there, but for me, I was so invested emotionally that I was like,
God. Dude, at this point, do you know what I thought was so cool about this? It's also heartbreakingly miserable. I was like, you get into this final boss, I'm now playing as white-haired York. I look like a mess. I'm like, it's time to get fucking redemption. Fuck this.
Yes.
Let's go.
Yeah. I mean, you consider like all the... something else I wanted to mention was that at the beginning of the game, you see that map. It's all little figurines of FK.
Yeah, I have another interpretation for you too.
What's that?
About this? I mean, essentially, what I think is that Francis York Morgan or Zach Morgan actually had an ulterior motive the entire game, where he was trying to solve the murder of his mom by following the Red Seed murders that happened to him as a kid.
Yeah, I think that's a fair interpretation.
And what was amazing to me is like I was so invested in finding the Raincoat Killer, and then it's George. And then they layer on this sort of his childhood, and he's trying to solve the murder of his parents in the last 30 minutes. And it's almost like you've been playing as an unreliable narrator. Like the whole game, obviously he's got a lot of issues. He talks to himself. And then what also kind of fucked with me too is that Forrest Kaysen, I think, was fucking with you the whole game. He knows who you are.
Yeah.
Like he killed your mom.
Something else. I mean, there's a couple other little things too. I mean, I think it's incredible that his name is Forrest.
Yep.
Like he's like the tree guy.
Yep.
You know? And when he first appears at the hotel, he leaves a sapling outside your room that stays there for the whole game.
Yeah.
Very, very ominous in hindsight. And it's crazy because I can't remember the last time, if any time, that like the bumbling like comic relief character turned out to be like the arch villain of the entire thing.
Right. Like if he ended up being the Raincoat Killer, yeah, fine, whatever. I've seen that before. But I feel like Deadly Premonition.
Well, he's sort of, so just to clarify for the audience, like he's sort of the mastermind. So he was behind George the whole time. That's what you find the photo in George's basement that shows the two of them together. That's the big revelation there.
Well, the boss battle is, it is what it is. You kill Forrest Kaysen.
Yes, he is pretty much at the end. I would say he seems like kind of like an alien.
Yeah.
Or like some kind of otherworldly being.
Yeah.
And he is destroyed. That's his character. He just blows up.
Yep. I believe he turns into a little doll, right? I think so.
That gets stepped on.
Right.
Yes. And then so basically you're kind of in the like Return to the King afterwards, where you're kind of getting closure for everything else. And so totally forgot about this part too. Harry takes off his mask at the end and reveals that George was his son. Yeah. And well, the whole thing was that he was not present in George's life, and he feels immense regret about it. And so he inadvertently also repeated the past of his father being the killer, and then now George is the killer, and he kind of inadvertently, did that by not being involved with his life. And I thought that was a really impactful scene. I like that you kind of spend the last couple minutes with like our favorite guys, Harry and Michael. Yeah. And Michael drives you around a little bit, and you walk into the woods. He says, "Leave me here," and you kind of get like a last little glimpse of the afterlife. Yeah, with the women who died in the game, essentially. Yes. And also Thomas. Yeah, which is very interesting. Yep. And what winds up, so you sort of see the York persona among them, like, I'll be here. Yeah, like, you got it from here, Zach. Right. I'm just rolling my eyes thinking about the next game. There is actually one last creepy moment in the hotel when you check out. Oh, really? Where you see a picture of Forrest Kaysen and all of the townspeople, and they're all together with the hotel lady in a group photo from 50 years ago. Oh, a little Shining thing going on there. Yep. Yeah. So, how did you feel about this ending as a whole? Let's get into it. So, I mean this like without exaggeration, where I did not expect Deadly Premonition to be one of the best video game stories I've ever played in my life. Yeah. But it is one of them. So I actually wrote out like a 3-paragraph speech here that I'm not going to read in its entirety because we've really sort of parsed it out. Sure. But for me, when you are essentially, the end game for me starts in the hospital where, hey, where's Emily? The doctor says she never showed up, and I said, this game fucking got me, didn't they? Yeah. Where I think Deadly Premonition wants you to think that the murder was easy to solve. You could have solved it hours ago. It's George. But then you get lulled into this sense of security where, this game was cute, whatever. Like, it's not very good, fuck it. But then you get this end game, you get York's childhood put into it. You've seen Agent York the way he wants to be seen the whole game. And then that is not what you look like. To me, I was like, oh my God, like this game is, and then, you get all the way to having to, essentially what's happening is, Forrest Kaysen took somebody you loved when you were a kid and he gets you again. Yeah. Oh, this game is like heartbreaking, dude. It's like, this game, oh my God. I could go on and on. Like, what thoughts do you have? I mean, this game is incredible, man. No, I think, I thought it was very effective because I thought Emily was a very successful character.
Yeah.
In terms of she's one of the only sane people in town, I guess, or relatively so. Like in terms of someone you can confide in, and you kind of your relationship develops naturally, which those cooking missions were easier to pull off. But in terms of like, we kind of glazed over it, but there's a lot of little scenes of getting to know each other better, and you can kind of talk to her in the car and stuff. And she thinks you're a fucking weirdo at first, and then gradually like learns to you know, like you, and vice versa. And it feels like you didn't know how bad you wanted the happy ending until it's ripped away from you.
right. And I think I had written down in my notes here, isn't this like one of the most like bittersweet and crushing endings ever that I've ever I have ever seen, like in a game, where I love how you don't quite get the romance, but when it's like you said, but when it's ripped away from you, you really wanted it.
Yeah. And it's just it's like just dangling it right in front of you.
And it's just, when I really think about like the last couple of seconds when your character's kind of driving away from it all.
Yeah.
And I'm like, did you solve the murder of your parents or your mom? Yes. But he got you again. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's
like hard to swallow, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Especially, I mean, I think movies have done this, but in terms of playing a game where you succeed, but also fail.
Yeah, exactly. Great way to put it.
Is rough. And I it's just like, it's so much better than I expected.
Yeah. I mean, the last 5 hours of this game is some of the best game I've ever played in my life.
It gets you so into it despite all the little
stupid shit. There's a lot of stupid shit.
But that's testament to how, you know, good writing can elevate, you know, a game that has its problems.
Of course.
So just one last maybe two sort of points of note before we get into final thoughts here. Something that I didn't know about, the director's cut adds a framing device. The director's cut came out in 2013.
Yep.
It adds a sort of framing device at the beginning and end of the game, showing an elderly Zach telling this story to his granddaughter.
Huh.
And number one, don't like that.
Nope, it makes it worse.
Because it kind of blows the Zach twist.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit.
That's why I think I said in the first few minutes of the show, the 360 version is considered ideal.
Right.
Because it was not a welcome cinematic.
Well, that alone, I mean, but at the end, you actually get a little taste of the second game.
Yeah.
Where Zach revisits York in the Grove.
Yeah.
And in their, like, you know, alternate reality, afterlife, whatever you want to put it. And York tells him about some sort of something's going on in New Orleans.
Oh, so they pull from that.
And at the end of it, the granddaughter tells her mother that Zach has disappeared.
Yep. Okay.
And I just thought it was funny because I didn't realize that he had that idea kicking around for so long.
No, I didn't either.
So that's one thing. One other thing, and I was looking up on the Deadly Premonition wiki about this. I was very confused about, you kind of had an alternate interpretation, but the Willie, the dog.
Yeah.
Right? Very odd, because I think it's very ingenious that he's there, because it kind of endears you to Kaysen.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Like, oh, he's a dog trusts him. Like, seems like an okay guy.
The dog helps you.
The dog helps you. And so that raises a lot of questions that don't get a firm answer for me, because what winds up happening is you destroy Forrest Kaysen, who is an alien entity. So my question is, like, so who is the dog to him? Number one, at the end of the game, the dog, like, tries to follow you with the doll in its mouth. And then
the Forrest Kaysen doll.
Yes.
Yeah.
When Zach walks away, he just drops it and he walks off.
Huh.
So Willie is not explained at all. It is possible, based on some interview clippings I read with Swery, that he was supposed to be involved somehow. Like, he was a supernatural entity all his own. But one thing, I'm not sure if you know this, the entire map of Greenvale is in the shape of a dog.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that is confirmed on purpose. Very interesting.
I think also here's the thing: we're giving this game a lot of rope here.
Yeah.
Like it has an incredible story, but there are a lot of flaws.
Yeah.
I think Willie is shown to the player so you trust Forrest.
Yeah.
Yeah. You follow Willie. He helps you. Oh, this is the derpy guy with the dog. Like, oh, he was trapped in the basement. It can't be him. You know,
Right.
he's so derpy and cute. That's the play.
Well, that's why he exists.
Yeah.
For the sake of the story, but in the lore,
What is the lore of Willie?
like the map being in his image is fascinating to me. But anyway, I just thought that was worth mentioning. Getting into final thoughts here.
Do you want to start and then maybe I'll go?
I will start. Yes. Perfect game size and length besides the combat sections.
Yeah, sure.
This is for like an open world. Imagine the map worked, right?
Yeah.
Imagine quest markers worked, etc. This would be the perfect size for me, like the map size. It's just like, and in terms of, I think if you cut out, let's be generous here. Let's say you cut out the combat sections, you would probably be left with like 12 to 15 hours.
Sure.
Right? Of, dick around with side quests, whatever. I think that is like, for a game like this that's telling a clear-cut story, that's a great length. Having only a couple dozen NPCs helps a lot too. Because you have sort of the time to flesh each of them out.
Yep.
You kind of go at your own pace to interact with them or not. So, I'm sure some people completely miss some of them. The big thing about this for me is that the mystery is very well constructed.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of moments that hold up to scrutiny and hindsight. In particular, I wanted to mention when Becky is killed and George cuts the wire. He did it on purpose.
Yep, of course.
And I was like, oh my God.
That made sense to me in retrospect.
And there's like, I think he's partially responsible for knocking over the statue.
Yep.
And very ironic that one line that York has, George, this isn't your fault.
Yeah, because he put trust in him. Yeah, exactly.
So there's a lot of like backwards, right? Like you have your answer to the mystery at the end, and then you work your way backwards, sort of planting the red seeds.
Yeah, nice.
And it does it in such a way that it just doesn't tip its hand too much.
Yeah.
And I think that is, for a game that has these wacky, bizarre, tonal, outlandish moments, like the fact that it has the taste in those moments to hold back and just kind of know when not to say anymore.
Yeah.
I think is incredible. It's like when you see what other people do, they blow it so often.
Right. Did you have anything else for your final thoughts?
For me, I just want to say, like we mentioned, your mileage may vary depending on how patient you can be with.
This game requires some patience.
Poor fidelity, action segments, pretty rough. In my opinion, the story makes it worth it. You get the impression Swery, above and beyond, above all else, cared about the story, telling this story in this way. The end game in particular feels a lot more effortful than a lot of the earlier stuff even.
Yep.
Like, it's like, in terms of how often we've played games where the last couple hours are a fucking slog.
Yeah, this game, it's the opposite.
It's the opposite, where you have these unique boss encounters and crazy plot twists and different types of sequences, like the Raincoat Killer sequence, stuff like that. It's just like, I really appreciate that it's rewarding you for sticking with it. And that's pretty uncommon that you have stuff like that. Getting into, I just want to apologize to the audience here. We're going to have a little a strange interruption when it comes to grades. I am adopting the Greg method of letter scoring. Oh, so we keep, please keep in mind that we are recording these out of release order. So you are going to get a couple other numerical scores after this. but we will be starting up a spreadsheet where we're keeping track of what we give
all these games.
Gonna try to keep in line with my previous opinions, but for me, this game is a B. It's a solid B. I think I've made my likes and dislikes pretty clear, but for a game that got like critically panned, I think a B is pretty, generous.
Sure.
Say.
So I'll give you my quick final thought. We've said plenty, I think, on this. I'll give you some quick fire thoughts, and then I'll give you a grade. I think this game, to me, is a polarizing masterpiece, is what I would call it, which is kind of a strange phrase, where, like I said, I was intrigued to play this game because some official reviewers thought it was the best game they've ever played. Some reviewers thought it was the most miserable dog shit they've ever seen.
Yeah.
And to me, I lean towards it being one of the best games I've ever played.
Yeah. It gets like, I think, unfairly compared to our favorite movie, The Room.
Oh, no way. Like, it's very different.
So I see where the comparison is coming from with like the weird tone and weird lines and stuff.
Yeah.
But the writing is so much more deliberate and competent.
Sure, of course. I think, like I said before, there are actually some positive aspects to this game where, even though the mechanics are shit, I kind of like how they have some survival horror mechanics.
Yeah.
Ammo is limited for good weapons. And the combat is not good, but you need some aspect of failure. So I didn't mind it, even though it was very derpy.
Yeah, and like your weapons can break and stuff. And
right. There's something to it.
Yeah.
And I think the most important thing for me is really I've said, I won't say much more. We've said it to death. The last 5 hours of the game is some of the best game I've ever played. Whether it's the character reveals or you're playing as an unreliable narrator the entire game, whether it's the visual reveal and of his childhood, I did not expect any of that when I played this. I thought,
and the crazy thing is that you mentioned they don't really talk about it earlier, because why would they? Yeah. And it somehow still works, even though it's amazing. Like a last minute thing.
I think like I teeter on what to give this game. I almost want to give it an A, but you can't because some aspects of it are so bad.
Yeah.
I think the best I can do is I think, in my opinion, I have to say B-, and those 80 points come purely from the narrative. Like, all the rest of it is horrific.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean. Like, it plays so badly, it looks terrible, it runs horribly. But if I were to, before we sign off here, what I would say is, if you are a Twin Peaks fan, please play it. Yeah. If you really want to play, if you're the kind of person who you're looking for a game that is going to tell a great story, please play this. Like, we are not kidding around. Like, when it has one of the best
Even
stories
if you
I've
hung
ever
in
seen.
there for spoilers, in execution, it is all its own thing. It's great.
Yeah. So I think we're going to end it for now. This was Deadly Premonition. We are going to talk about the second one. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. This got longer than I thought. There was a lot to say about Deadly Premonition, but please play it. Thank you guys. We'll see you next time.